let's check out a little indie gem called Eastshade. I saw Eastshade on Xbox Game Pass, and I probably wouldn't have given it a second thought had I seen it on Steam or anything, but it was only a gig and a half on Xbox Game Pass, and it looked like a sort of quick, fun walking sim that you can finish in about 3 hours. What it turned out to be was a little bit more than that, and I was interested in it enough in it after playing around with it for just a little bit to finish the entire thing, completionist mode, with all achievements and everything. And it's such a relaxing, fun little game that I just wanted to share my thoughts on it and hopefully bring some attention to it for any of you guys looking for something like that. What is Eastshade? Well, Eastshade is it's an adventure game. It's an adventure game with sort of RPG-esque feel to it because it's open world and free roaming, and it's a game where that sort of feels like an Elder Scrolls game almost. It feels like the best way I can describe it is sort of Morrowind or Oblivion without possibly Skyrim without any sort of combat. So if you were to just go through those games and meet NPCs and take on their quests and freely explore the open world, that's kind of what Eastshade is. In Eastshade, you play as an artist, a painter, and the main plot of the game revolves around your mother has just passed away, and her dying wish was that you travel to the island of Eastshade and paint portraits of her 4 favorite landmarks on the island. So you sort of begrudgingly go, you don't really know what to expect, and it's sort of insinuated it early on in the game that your character's not really that interested in it. Parallels to the Elder Scrolls are going to be very apparent in the opening of the game that takes place on a ship, again feeling much like the game Morrowind in its opening, with the addition of the fact that you can walk around the ship freely and talk to all the inhabitants on the ship, and you'll get little dialogue choices and dialogue trees, and you can choose your own responses, and you even get the same sort of Elder Scrolls and Fallout-esque zoom in on the character while you're speaking to them. So on your way to Eastshade, you're actually shipwrecked on a reef right outside of the city that you were trying to sail to, and you wash up ashore. And that's kind of how the game starts. It gives you a sort of jumping off point to start conversations with people and sort of collect some of your supplies so that you can start painting again, and introduce you to some of the mechanics like being able to craft items if you don't have the actual item you need, like canvases, for example, for painting. So Eastshade is kind of set in a fantasy universe where instead of like in the Elder Scrolls, you have like humans and the Khajiit and the I forget what the lizard people are called, and all the different races. In Eastshade, instead of having those more sort of Elder Scrolls-y fantasy races, they're sort of anthropomorphized people or not people, animals or bipedal animals, and basically so they have the face and relative body of the animals, but they sort of walk and hold themselves like people. It's not quite like Redwall, but I guess sort of like Redwall, if you will. And there are bears, badgers, owls, and chimpanzees throughout the world. I believe your character is an owl. It's sort of insinuated that you are. And you can pick your own character name, too, at the beginning of the game. So it's, again, like it's a very fantasy-like world, and it's very aesthetically pleasing. It's these beautiful forests with all this foliage and all of these this undergrowth, and there's over the island of Eastshade, there's a bunch of different biomes, so one forest is going to be more lush with like overhanging trees, and another forest is going to be more coniferous trees, but the needles on them are actually pink. I think it's called the blushing forest or something to that effect. You have large lakes. You obviously have the ocean surrounding it on all sides, rivers. You have these sort of bluffs with these windmills and sort of grassy lands on there. You have snowy mountains to the north and even like permanent glaciers north of that. So there's a lot of visual and natural diversity in the game. And then, of course, there's two major cities. The first city you'll go into, again, it's really going to give you sort of Oblivion slash Morrowind vibes, the architecture. And then moving into the main large city called Nava in the game, it's sort of like Europe meets Middle Eastern architectural sensibilities, very sort of Moorish, southern Spain, Andalusian sort of architecture. So it's a really interesting looking game world, and a really beautiful game world. Comparisons, of course, to the Elder Scrolls are going to come into the soundtrack as well. As you explore the world of Eastshade, you will notice, if you've played Skyrim or The Witcher 3, that it basically, I'd say 25% of the time it sounds like The Witcher 3 soundtrack, but 75 or maybe even more, maybe 85% of the time, it sounds like, I would say Skyrim or Morrowind the most really gives you that sort of those Elder Scrolls vibes. And I think the way in which you interact with the characters and the feel of the cities and the feel of even just free roaming and even the control scheme with that Y for jump control scheme, it just really is going to make you... It exudes influence from the Elder Scrolls, especially Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. So the game, if it is Elder Scrolls minus combat, then what is it? Well, it's going to be quests where your interactions with characters are going to be very important. What options you choose in dialogue, what information you choose to divulge or keep to yourself, how you choose to help certain people. The option to help them or not is always there, and then of course puzzles. I mean, it's not really like Elder Scrolls. You can't go in and rob people, although you can sort of steal stuff in the game. But nobody's gonna get upset or you get thrown in jail or anything like that. There's no combat whatsoever. There's no like sneaking or stealth or magic, but there is just the general feel of when you go on a quest, it's going to feel like an Elder Scrolls quest. And so since quest lines and narrative and characters are going to be at the heart of how this game plays out, I really like that some of the quest line stories weave into each other, much like they do in the Elder Scrolls. But another thing I really like is, since there are a lot of puzzles to be solved in the game in some of the general quest lines, I like that a lot of the puzzles and the solutions therein are actually going to be interwoven and dependent on other quests in the game. So there's only one main quest in the game, and that's to paint the 4 portraits, or paint the 4 landscapes. And some of them are easy. I mean, the first one is just a giant tree, which it's not that easy, because to get to the tree you have to pay a toll to get across a toll bridge. And how do you do that? Well, you have to start earning money. And how do you do that? Well, you have to start walking around the town and start helping people and taking on their side quests. So it's that kind of game, and again, a very similar quest structure to something we've seen like in Skyrim, where you want something sort of simple, but you have to do a lot of things. You have to talk to this person, and he wants you to go collect this, and you have to talk to that person, and you have to show them how to do this. One person in one of the taverns just wants a portrait painted of them. And you may not have the supplies for that. So this is kind of how it goes. But that's just the main quest. The side quests are all over the place. And then, of course, the side quests help you get to the main quest. One of the main quests requires you to go onto the tallest building in the main city. But they're doing construction on it, so you need a pass to get up there. And I think there are a couple of different ways to get a pass, or at least a couple of different ways to get up there. But one of the ways requires you to get a pass from a researcher at the university, and she'll only give it to you if you help her do something, which is going to send you to every corner of the map of the game. So as you can see, this is how the game plays out. But the side quests and how they interact with each other is fantastic too. Like, for example, I finished a side quest involving like mirrors and light and solving riddles and stuff, to be given a potion that helps me identify items, certain kinds of items, and that potion helped me finish a quest on the other side of the map that had absolutely nothing to do with the quest I was on. And the thing I sort of liked is I had to figure things out on my own. It wasn't like the guy who lost the item said, "Oh, I heard of this lady on the other side of the map that you need to go check out. I heard she might have some way of helping us." No, you just have to figure it out on your own. So I really like that the puzzles are never super hard. They just require you to sort of pay attention to everything that you hear from, when you're having conversations with people, down to, much like in the Elder Scrolls, you can walk into rooms and find books laying around. And in paying attention to what's written in those books is sometimes the difference between figuring out a puzzle or being stuck. The other main component of the game outside of like puzzle solving and questing is obviously exploration. And there are different things that inhibit the player's exploration through the game. One is that your walking speed is pretty slow. Another is that night times on Eastshade are incredibly cold, so as soon as nighttime hits, you can't travel or you can't do anything because your screen will start to frost over and you need to set up camp by setting up a tent or putting down a campfire or something. So the player progression in the game, if you're going to sort of compare it to a certain class of RPG, possibly like your Metroidvanias, but a little closer to maybe something like Zelda or even, believe it or not, System Shock, where your progression and your character build is sort of a function of the equipment that you have collected in the game and the knowledge that you have as a player character in the game, rather than like stats or this or that. For example, the fast travel in the game is not readily apparent. You can't just open up the map and fast travel. In order to fast travel, you have to collect a special tea. I think it's called, they call it Walker's Tea or something like that. And this is going to be dependent on if you know the recipe and have the resources for the Walker's Tea, and also if you have the ability to brew Walker's Tea by having bought a teapot at one of the markets. Another thing is there are zip lines that can help you traverse the world very quickly, and of course you need to buy a hook to actually travel on the zip lines. If you want to travel at night unhindered, there's two things you can do. You can buy mead, which keeps you warm at night. It sort of warms the body. Or you can actually, if you save up enough money, go into one of the markets and buy a cloak to wear at night. So again, and also some things are cut off by waterways. So the ability to craft watercraft like canoes or rafts to be able to pass streams or larger bodies of water is going to be dependent on the equipment that you found in the game. So that's how player progression. There is a feeling of progression through the game where towards the end of the game you know how to make all sorts of different types of teas to help you do this or that, and you have all the equipment so you don't have to worry about being out at night. And you can even travel on the ocean, which is something you can't do for quite a ways through the game. So it's got this nice. Oh, and also there's a bicycle, so you can actually buy a bicycle. One thing that's kind of an interesting aspect to the free roam is that when you're just free roaming on the forest floor, you actually move fairly slowly, even with the run button held down. But once you go onto a path or a road, you move quite a bit quicker. So again, sort of incentivizing, if you need to travel from one point to the other, maybe stick to the roads. And then again, you can go to a mechanic in one of the towns and actually buy a bicycle. And by the way, guys, if you are planning on playing this game, I would recommend you just go ahead and buy the bicycle as soon as possible. It is a little bit expensive, but man, is it a much faster way to get around. I didn't get it till the late game, and I was just kicking myself for not having it. But so that's a nice feeling of progression, towards the end of the game, feeling like, okay, there's nothing I can't access, and there's no reason that travel, even on foot, should take a super long time because of all the extra gear that I have now. The game, freely exploring the game world, is visually very interesting. It's a total treat, and it's just such a relaxing experience. It's all the best parts of walking simulators, but it doesn't ever get boring. I mean, even the game Firewatch got a little boring in some places, and it was a little long for its own good. This game really packs in the density of content such that there are never large stretches of you moving or exploring or doing anything where you're not accomplishing something. Whether you're gathering materials or ingredients that you find growing, natural ingredients that you're finding out in the forest for brewing teas or crafting things, whether you're coming upon a new area that you haven't discovered, whether you're running into new characters, whether you're finding relevant quest items or starting quests with different characters. or whether you're opening the world up into new areas or finding new equipment or new schematics to build a new equipment, the world never gives you large stretches where you're just accomplishing nothing but moving from A to B. It's almost never a waste of time to be moving around the environment and looking at stuff and picking things up. And so that's one of the things that keeps it engaging and never gets boring or tedious. I would say that the game world was perfectly, for the goal of the game, the aim of the game, I would say that it was perfectly crafted for the type of game that they wanted to make. Something that gives the general impression of what you feel like doing a lot of quests in an Elder Scrolls game without the sort of daunting size of an Elder Scrolls game, and without sort of the tedium that comes with huge, large open world maps or walking simulators where you walk very, very slowly and there's not a lot to do. In addition to that, you'll see in a lot of walking simulators like this, you'll just kind of be, or even puzzle or adventure games like this, you'll just kind of be stuck in one spot. Games like Quern, The Undying, the entire Myst series, the world that you inhabit is very sort of static. And another thing that they add that not only keeps it feeling like a sort of open world RPG, Elder Scrolls type game, but also keeps the feeling fresh is that there's the addition of a day-night cycle, randomized weather with storms and what have you, an overcast, a daily lunar eclipse around noon. And all of these things keep the world feeling fresh. It's never going to be the same time of day all the time. It's not always going to be the same kind of weather. It does make the world feel more alive and like a living, breathing place, and keeps it interesting to keep exploring the world. In addition to the perfect size for the open world being a sort of perfect size to give you enough to do and keep exploration fun, and it's not so small that you can see the island in a few minutes. It's not so big that it's daunting or becomes tedious to traverse. In the same vein, the game itself is not so long or big that it becomes daunting or tedious or a giant time vampire. Neither is it too small like some of these other adventure games where it's really a 2 or 3 hour ordeal. It's going to be about 10, 12 hours if you do all the side quests and everything, which is totally fine. I would say that in my playthrough, because it was such a sort of cathartic, enjoying, relaxing experience, I never got to a point where I was like, oh, this game needs to end now, or like it was just the absolute perfect length. And so many other design choices in the game reflect this, from the number of side quests, the relative amount of time it takes to finish the main campaign, the time it takes to finish most side quests, and the map size and traversal speed and traversal options. They all just help keep the game that perfect amount of content the entire way through. So as stated previously, the main sort of gameplay in the game is going to revolve around puzzle solving and then, of course, exploration. Another aspect of the gameplay, or at least sort of a theme in a lot of the quests, is, of course, painting. A lot of quests are going to be solved by people commissioning paintings from you or asking you to paint a certain thing, or you can change their mind with a beautiful painting or something like that. And so... and then, of course, the main quest requires you to paint 4 different landscapes. And your ability to paint is governed by a stat called inspiration. And it's not a stat like an RPG stat, it's a stat like health or hunger or something like that. And this fills the more that you explore the island. And it depletes upon doing certain actions, upon drinking things like mead, and other different teas, and it also depletes or is consumed when painting. It's a required stat in order for you to actually paint a lot of the portraits in the game. And so the game will be filled with ways to fill these meters or to get around obstacles in the game, so that you can actually accomplish a lot of the goals of many of the side quests. So, for example, if you're required to paint for a quest and you've run out of inspiration, and perhaps you might even have run out of places to explore in the local area, one thing that you can do is join an underground club of what are called dreamers in the main city. And what they do is they have this little underground sort of tea room place with these like floating lily pads, and you drink this hallucinogenic tea. And every time you finish a trip, so to speak, you actually gain inspiration. In addition to that, like I said, there are, as I mentioned previously, there's things like being able to drink mead for warmth, so that if you don't have a cloak but you need to be doing stuff at night, you can stay warm enough to not have to sleep until morning when you're out exploring or fulfilling quest objectives at night. So, and then of course, as we talked about as well, the game gives you a lot of different exploration tools, things like the bicycle and zipline hooks. And what I like about this is that there's a lot of ways for the player to get through the game world and accomplish objectives and accomplish what they want to do without having to stick to some sort of linearly prescribed method of approach. There's a lot of options, there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of situations that the player can exploit without having to do things a certain way. A great example of that is money. So, there's a lot of ways to make money in the world. You can sell items. Sometimes people will pay you for doing certain quests. People will commission paintings and pay you for the paintings. There's a lot of ways to make money. But should you ever be short of cash, or if you need to buy some new gear in the city, and you're maybe like a few, they're called what are they called? Glowstones is the currency in the game. You're a few glowstones short. Well, you can even go to, there are fields, pea fields, on I believe it's the western edge of the city, and you can actually work. So you can go there and work. So if you need extra money and you've run out of things to sell, you can just go and work to round out your finances. You can sell things to round out your finances, like I said. Another thing, a great example, is there's a quest where you need to buy a crafting component that's selling for 500 glowstones. And I wouldn't say it's impossible to get that amount in the game, because it totally isn't impossible. But it's difficult, especially at the point in the game at which you're arriving at this quest. However, you can trade information. If you've completed a previous quest, you can trade information to the vendor to get the crafting material anyways. So the game gives you flexibility and choice for how you want to approach its obstacles and objectives, and I like that. I like that about the game, because it could have very easily been a lot more linear in how it wants you to do things, or even the order in which it wants you to do quests, and the fact that it's so open-ended with the order in which you do quests, how you accomplish certain things. I mean, you have to do a lot of stuff at night, but because of the inclusion of things like mead, you may not even need to buy a cloak for the entire game. You certainly don't need to buy the hooks. No, you do. At some point you need to buy the zipline hooks. But this sort of brings me to my next sort of point about the game, that one of the things I liked about it. It's just more than just a walking sim. Firewatch is a great example of a game that is more walking sim than anything else, and it's not how I perceived it to be advertised as. And this game, I thought it was going to be a pure walking sim. I thought it was going to be linear as hell with, I don't know, some greater themes about philosophy or allegories for alcoholism or whatever. And it's not that at all, and it's definitely more than just a walking sim. There's a crafting component, and as I said before, there's sort of a Metroidvania-esque or Zelda-esque aspect to it, where you don't have to craft certain things to finish the story, but you can, and it aids in things like speed of traversal, or the ability to fast travel, or anything like that. As I said before, you can craft a campfire. You can brew the teas that you need at a campfire rather than having to buy them in town. There's even a fishing minigame as well. What you can do is you can use the fish to catch bigger fish, and some of those might be quest relevant. You can use the fish to craft bait, which you again might need for other quests, require you to bait traps and things like that, or use bait for whatever. Or again, it's another way. It's something enjoyable to do. The minigame is actually pretty fun. It requires you to cast in certain areas, use the right bait, and then it's as many fishing mini games do. You have to reel the line in, which you have to watch the tension. If the tension on the line gets too high, it'll snap and you'll lose your fish. And then of course you can sell those fish or trade them with people throughout the game world. There's, you know, harvesting, much like in Elder Scrolls or a lot of other open world games, just going through the world and finding, you know, things that you can harvest, roots and special flowers that you'll use for teas and things to make rope out of, and wood and canvas to make painting canvases out of and things like that. So there's a, you know, sort of collecting and harvesting mechanic as well. You can paint landscapes anytime, you know. That's the other thing about the game, is that the painting is not, it's not like you go to one place and you press a contextual button and then you watch your character paint. You can set up, it's kind of like photo mode in some games. You can paint whenever you want. You can set the cropping of the image, you set the angle, you can set time of day by sleeping and changing the time of day. You can paint during the eclipse, you can paint during rain, you can paint during nighttime. So you can paint whenever. And you can sell these paintings, you can use them for quest relevant things. Another thing that you can do is you can, if you really like a particular landscape in the game, you can export your paintings out of the game to your desktop. I think you can use them as backgrounds for, like, you know, for your computer or for your phone or whatever. So that's kind of cool. You can rent rooms at there are a couple of inns throughout the game. You can rent rooms there. You can buy consumables from them, the innkeepers and stuff. So it's more than just a walking sim. There is some depth to the mechanics in the game and the things that you can do. I'd like to point out too that, you know, typically in a walking simulator there will be some sort of general narrator, or you'll just read like little documents as you go through, or have flashbacks or whatever as you just walk at the same speed through a sort of linear series of events. In this game, again, you know, it's an open world exploration game, and the quests are going to have a similar tone and feel to an Elder Scrolls game. Each one has a unique plot. Each one gives you, I mean, I don't think there's any quest that is so similar to the other that you're like, oh, another one of these. I mean, they're each going to have different elements of gameplay. They're going to ask you to do certain things with the gameplay mechanics of the game. They're going to have a completely different narrative. They're going to have a completely different set of activities for you to do in order to accomplish them. And a lot of them are going to have a sort of puzzle element to them. And so attention to detail, in particular dialogue, or as I've said before, finding books and notes that you've read around the map is going to be crucial in completing a lot of these quests. Some examples of some of the quests that are in the game that really sort of were noteworthy to me, or one where you help a disfigured architect who's become sort of a recluse and is hiding out from society, so you actually help him rejoin society and sort of unravel a greater mystery about where he went and things like that. You have to bait and trap an endangered animal, one of the last ones left in this nature preserve, so that the park ranger can go and apply first aid to it because it's been infected by something, but no one can catch it. You actually can produce and paint several new advertisements for a new method of air travel, and then figure out the best place to post them around town to increase the customer base and sales for the proprietor of that business. There's a Poirot-style mystery where you go to this inn/hotel, you know, in the middle of a stormy night, and you show up, and there's been a dastardly criminal caper, and everyone's locked in the hotel, and no one can leave until you figure out get to the bottom of the mystery. And so you'll have to go around and you know, investigate people's rooms and investigate everything around the hotel, look for clues and interrogate people and interview them. There's a horror-based quest in the north of the map that it takes place at a sort of icy research station, and it's sort of reminiscent, and I think it's paying homage to things like At the Mountains of Madness and, you know, The Thing. So again, you know, it's more than just all of these quests have different tone. They have real character, and they have a lot of thought and care put into them. And as I said before, there are a lot of quests in the game, but there's just the perfect amount in to not be overwhelming, not draw on too long, and keep the game at that absolutely perfect length, and of course the perfect density of content and everything. So I'm just going to tell you the few negative points I would make about the game are that it is a Unity engine game. As many of you know, I this week reviewed Cyberpunk 2077. I'm running a 1660 Super with an 8-core Ryzen 7 3800 XT, 32 gigs of RAM, and an SSD. I was running Cyberpunk 2077 at Ultra with a pretty stable 50 frames per second after some patches. And I could even turn low-level ray tracing on and get about 25-30 frames a second. All right, so it's not like a powerhouse PC, but it should be doing fine. This game is not insanely visually, it's not technically visually impressive. Aesthetically, I think it's beautiful, but technically, the technology is not there. The graphics are not up to that level. But because it's a Unity game and because it's so poorly optimized, I was having frame drops. I could run this on Ultra most of the time, but occasionally I'd get these massive frame drops down into like 25, 30 frames a second from 60. So it has some performance issues. There are a couple of bugged zones in the map as well, where no matter what your settings are, you're just going to drop into sub 30 frame rate, or even sub 20 in some instances. And I think I looked up in the forums, and it just has something to do with there's a big performance bug in that area, and there's just not a lot you can do about it. Another thing I would say that's just sort of a negative is that autosaves are not super generous. Now, who cares? It's a exploration adventure game with no combat, and there are very few instances where you can like screw things up, like you didn't finish a quest the way you wanted to, or you didn't get the thing that you needed. So who cares? Well, the issue is that my first couple playthroughs, first several hours of the game is incredibly stable, and it still is a fairly stable game considering the sort of scope of it. But you will get occasional freezes and crashes and things like that. And the thing that sucks is that you do have to sort of not save scum, but you got to save all the time in this game, because it's very easy to lose like 20-30 minutes of progress because the autosaves are just not very generous. So should you encounter a crash or a bug or something, it's a little frustrating because the autosaves are not generous, and having to manually save all the time in a game that's just you sort of walking around exploring, it does kind of take you out of the experience a little bit. I did get mildly frustrated at 1 or 2 points because of that. So that's just something to point out. Overall, I mean, for a Unity game, and also considering, the state of a lot of indie games these days, this is not a buggy experience. Everything works pretty solidly, so I don't want to give you the impression that it's a janky, buggy mess, but I did want to point those two things out, even though I've been praising the game for the past 30 minutes or so. Eastshade is definitely a game I would recommend. It was this like little hidden gem that I didn't think I was going to care about, but I ended up playing it from start to finish, 100%ing every single quest. I got 100% of the achievements in the game, and I really would recommend that you do that. If you want to see everything this game has to offer, it's not hard to get all the achievements, and getting all the achievements and finishing all the side quests will help you see everything the game has to offer. And so, in closing, I would really recommend this game. I know just a few seconds ago I said I got frustrated, but that was just due to a bug. If you can just keep, saving fairly regularly, this is a game. Sometimes you play indie games to relax, and you'll hit a point where you hit like a boss, or you hit a point where you can't figure out a puzzle or whatever, and you get a little annoyed, you get a little frustrated, and if you already have a lot of anxiety and stress in your life, you just want to go to a game where there's nothing wrong, nothing bad is going on. You're not going to get stuck. It's all just about having a fun experience, but it's more than your typical walking sim that doesn't have any actual gameplay to it. This game has so much heart and character, and again, it gives you those sort of Elder Scrolls vibes without having to go into sort of the daunting task of actually starting an 150, 200-hour Elder Scrolls game. It's the perfect little I started over the Christmas weekend after playing a game called Grey Dawn, which was Christmassy but very grim. and serious subject matter. And that's another thing I love about this game. You know, in Elder Scrolls games, you might deal with things like substance abuse, murder, rape, um, occultism, all sorts of, you know, it can get pretty grim, pretty dark, the subject matter in those games, or Fallout or whatever. This is Elder Scrolls feeling, but I think the worst thing anyone is accused of doing in this game is stealing some crops from their neighbor. And then at the conclusion of that quest, they said, "Oh, I'm going to use the extra earnings I made since you helped me to go pay him back and apologize." So like, it's also a very wholesome world. Eastshade is, you know, if you just want something to like really forget your troubles, relax. The music is beautiful, the visuals are beautiful. There's no point in the game where you're going to get annoyed or frustrated with anything. It all just kind of like, it's a very smooth, relaxing, soothing experience. And so if you're looking for something to unwind with, like truly unwind with, you could do a lot worse than Eastshade. I highly recommend you check out this game if you like adventure games and you just want to just get lost in a beautiful world for a little bit. So thank you guys for checking out this review. I hope that you, if you were interested in checking out the game, you know, support the developers, go pick it up. I would say, I don't know what it's going for right now. I would imagine it's going for, I just looked it up, guys. Yeah, it typically goes for about $25. Considering, like I said, it's a about 12, 13-hour game all in. I don't think that's crazy, but I think $13 on sale right now for the Steam sale, I think that's a pretty fair price. So, you know, somebody sort of threw out, I forget who said it, but a while back, that a game should be roughly $1 per hour, somewhere in that range. Or at least, at the very least, you should be getting $1 per hour out of your experience. That's the most you should be paying. So yeah, I get for you know, a 13-hour experience, you know, $12.50 on sale. I would say support the developers, go pick it up, check this game out, and I gotta say I'm very excited to see what they come up with next. So thanks for you guys for checking out this review, and that's gonna be it for me.